Good afternoon.
Hello. Sahtin, everyone. Hope you had a good meal. Okay, we're about to start the second panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Hiba. Thank you to Oxfam. Thank you for the European Union to invite us to this nice open dialogue. And I myself, my name is Ralf Klingbeil. I'm from the Geological Survey in Germany, the Federal Institute for Geosciences and Natural Resources. I'm very happy to be again here. I was in the Lebanon Water Forum #1, and now we finally have, not finally, I hope only the second now, and have hopefully more of these forums in the future. I already enjoyed it a lot to hear and listen to the ideas of the new general directors of the four water establishments, and also the keynote speech was very interesting. I think this dialogue is definitely something what we like to see in Lebanon, what we enjoy as a dialogue between the different dimensions of water here at national level, but maybe also a little bit beyond to see how we can place Lebanon better on the map at the regional or global level and how we can improve things also in this direction. So my side, as I mentioned, it's the Federal Institute for Geoscience and Natural Resources. We used to work very closely with the ministry and also the the Beirut Mount Lebanon Water Establishment for the protection of the Jata Spring until 2013. And I think we did a fairly good job. At least a lot of good information, new information is available on the groundwater protection for the spring. And we are hopefully coming back soon also to deal with groundwater management in Lebanon further. Next steps are coming on that hopefully at some stage. Now to our panel in the afternoon. We are shifting a bit away from the actual implementation at the water establishment level and want to look a little bit and review a little bit more the broader sector strategies and aspects. And in that angle, maybe a few words to start with before we then go into the group. But maybe let me just introduce the group because maybe not everybody is known so well. Let me start with the lady, Susie Hoajek, is that correct? She is now working with the Ministry of Energy and Water, and you also have been involved with the Lebanese crisis response plan for quite a long time already. Then we have Ziad Khayat from the UN Economic Commission for Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia. I should know this since I was working with him until 2016. And we have also Michele Pierpaoli. This is not so easy for me, I'm sorry. Who is here for the delegation of the European Union. And also Rami Saliba from the Agence Française de Développement. Thank you. To start with, maybe to give us a bit broader aspect, yesterday, 19th of March, in UNESCO, in the UN Human Rights Council in Paris, the World Water Development Report 2019 was presented. We come back to similar numbers like every year. This year, the theme of the World Water Development Report is leaving no one behind. But still, there are 2.1 billion people at global level who have no access to safe water or clean water supply. And there are even more now, it's increasing every year, 4.3 billion people who have still no access to safe and sustainable sanitation. What we also have seen now over the years, we have, since 2015, we have seen a shift from the Millennium Development Goals to the Sustainable Development Goals at global level, to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, with new goals, 17 Sustainable Development Goals, multiple targets and indicators, and envisaging a world without poverty, a world without hunger, and of course, with sufficient water and sanitation for everybody by 2030, which is quite a challenging timeline. Addressing interlinked economic, social, and environmental issues, a much broader development challenges than it was in the Millennium Development Goals. And what we also have seen since then is that we have two new human rights. We have human rights for water and sanitation, two separate ones to stress on the sanitation. This was not there in 2010 and 2012 when the National Water strategy was drafted and agreed on in Lebanon. And it would be interesting to see a little bit where we are today and how our national strategies are also addressing these issues at global level. Interesting maybe about the two human rights is that particularly the Arab countries were quite strong at global level to voice their support for these two human rights issues. We've seen even human rights for water being established in a number of constitutions in the Arab region. Not yet in Lebanon, but I think there is potential to improve. We also saw we already talked about the national water strategy. It would be now, in this context, interesting to go one step back and also see in how far all these Lebanese strategies are still fitting into this new world or into this broader global sustainable development agenda. Is there a need to review and revise the strategy? I heard some rumors that this is going to happen already, so it would be interesting to hear a bit more on this and what can we do to fit it more into the sustainability agenda at global level also. And then maybe some other questions. I mean, how many people in Lebanon have not yet been receiving 24/7 secure water and safe water? We know, I've read this Lebanon crisis response plan, the water sector aspect, and I was quite surprised to read that only 47% of the people in Lebanon have safe water in the sense of no E. coli in the water. I was quite surprised about this relatively high figure, but that might be including a lot of informal settlements, and you may give some. Yeah. Statistics is always a bit tricky, but it would be interesting to hear aspects how we can improve this further. So how many people have been left behind in Lebanon, and how do we want to find a way to bring them back on the water table? These are, of course, not only Lebanese. These are also plenty of refugees from Palestine, Syria, or elsewhere. What can we do about this? And how can we actually implement also the human rights to water and sanitation? So in that context, I think it is interesting to see what this World Water Development Report proposes. And it starts with requesting more courage for unconventional solutions. I think there is a lot of this discussion here also, but we don't see much implemented yet. Not always necessary, and that catches up on the keynote earlier, it might be not necessary to always have the absolute best technology, because it might be just too expensive, but rather the most suitable and taking into affordability also into account. And in that context, I think they are also proposing to follow more a guidance of good governance and human rights-based approaches to overcome hierarchical power structures, to increase accountability, transparency, legitimacy, and participation, justice, and efficiency. These are big words, so I wish that we can maybe follow up on a few of them during our discussions. And maybe I can just start a quick question on this from each of you on the National Water Strategy, where we are and how it can move forward. Maybe you want to start from your perspective, from the ministry?
So now you have to bear with me because I have to talk a lot. So on the national water sector strategy, for those who don't know, it was approved in 2012, and we have been for a year now, maybe, in the process of updating it, but the update has been delayed a little bit. But with our new minister and the new government, there is pressure to update it as quickly as possible. So this is what we will be doing very soon. The water strategy will revise, if you want, some of the aspects of the 2012 strategy and add new dimensions to give it a more updated and a more innovative aspect. The emphasis, I don't know if you want me to talk about the elements of the most important things that we need to tackle. I don't know how to...
Yeah, I think it would be interesting to, I mean, the old strategy is well known, but maybe where you see that the future might have a bit more emphasis on what could be, and I think also maybe if there are kind of what you're proposing, what you're foreseeing as kind of measurable indicators? Do we have these kind of key performance indicators to measure our success over time?
Yes,
what kind of
and in
timelines?
the 2012 there wasn't any real indicators to see our progress today. However, there was a roadmap, a very clear roadmap. We were able to progress on several elements of the roadmap, especially when it comes to water networks, to development of water resources, dams. However, we are still behind in wastewater. We are still behind in irrigation. And these two are highly important for several reasons. First of all, wastewater is a very important aspect of the water sector. We are behind. It took us a lot of time to get a strategy together, but in 2012 we also issued a strategy for the wastewater. And the strategy and the implementation has to be speeded up. And we will be working on that because it's not acceptable that our wastewater treatment plants remain as preliminary as we have them today. Several of them, as Mr. Jean Gibran said, work on primary treatment. This is not acceptable. Several are not completely connected to a complete network or to all the network of the watershed. We have to not only speed up the implementation, we have to speed up our arrival to tertiary treatment. Why? Because from tertiary treatment, this is how we can reach our SDG goals or all the other, we can, if you want, account for climate change. From the tertiary treatment, we can reuse water for irrigation. This is not just talking. This is, I know it's very far-fetched. You're going to say, oh my God, now you're talking about irrigation, reuse of water for irrigation. Yes, but I have to set the standard very high and try to reach there. We will not accept to remain where we are. So this is one of the aspects, irrigation, wastewater, treating the water, reusing the water, and upgrading the irrigation channels, because most of our water goes wasted in irrigation channels. 60 to 70% of our water that is used, our fresh water in Lebanon, is used for irrigation. We pump water, we pump underground water to irrigate our plants. Okay, so all of our underground reserve is going, most of it, to irrigation. And this is not really acceptable. We have enough surface water to irrigate our crops. So this is an aspect that we have to also look at in depth in our new strategy. It's not just another element. It's the element, plus the wastewater, plus other stuff that I like. For example, like rainwater harvesting. This is something I like. I don't know. I want to see how we can integrate this, maybe in public institutions, maybe in public gardens. I don't know. We're going to find a way, Dr. Nadim. I want to put everything in the strategy. So this is regarding our national water. Definitely, there's a big part which is very, very important, the administrative part. This is the infrastructure. We talked about it. Demand management, supply management, this is very good. But the other part is the implementation part. This is where the administrative implementation part, and this is where the role of water establishments comes in. And the biggest load is on the water establishments. Yes, they are understaffed. Yes, they do not collect enough fees. Their fees are not up to their operation and maintenance costs. So this also was tackled partly in the 2012 strategy, but from now on we have to dig deeper and to help as much as possible as ministry and as donors and as stakeholders to help the water establishments reach a fair tariff, a fair income, or a fair revenue, let me say, so that they become financially autonomous and so that they can they can be handed over all of the facilities that the laws say they should be operating and maintaining. I cannot ask them to operate and maintain a wastewater treatment plant, and they cannot even collect the fees for it. Plus, another thing, things are coming into my head now. For example, why should we stick to the conventional, I'm finding the word, the conventional ways of treating wastewater. Conventional treatment of wastewater is highly expensive and is highly dependent on energy. What should we do? What are our alternatives? How can we upgrade our existing wastewater treatments and our designed ones to make them less expensive and more compatible with the context that we have today? Okay, so all of these are ideas that we wish to include in our national water strategy, and we need all of us to help each other put the strategy together and implement it. This is the most important part. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's, I think already offering a lot of entry points for. No, that's okay. And I want to come back to you also. So we will have a bit of a discussion at the beginning, but I would like to open up to additional questions from your side later. But particularly when it comes to additional wastewater treatment option, I think your colleague was talking about these reed bed treatments and other tools already. You want to add something?
I'll start with that and go back on a general comment on the updating of the strategy. So yes, there is a big challenge of finding suitability, the suitability between the zoning, the zone, like the capacities of the topography of the place, what is related to the geographical component, and also to the climate and the conditions, existing conditions, and between also and what all investments should be axed towards the capacity of management and who would be actually helping the water establishments in managing any investment. Like the reed bed, it's not the only choice, but the reed bed filtration is one of the, if one of the options, like the one in Psharri or the one of USAID in Khirbet Anafar. Actually, these were choices made to facilitate operation, made on input, whereas inflow of wastewater that is suitable for the technology, made to respect the topography of the place, and made also to generate less sludge, which is actually taking care of what's the byproduct of such technology also, which we seem to forget most of the time, and also to cost less in operation and maintenance. I will go back just to say something about, from a donor perspective, of course, we don't set the strategy, it's a sovereign mandate of Lebanon via the ministry. But I would say very fast that for us, our job is to align with the strategy. And our job also, as Olivier said in his opening speech, is to support and create the enabling environment for any update of a strategy, and that's what we're heading towards right now.
I understood that actually the strategy may not only, I mean, in the past there was a lot of focus on we need more dams and very much strong focus on dams, not necessarily only, but primarily. But I understand that now you might also want to look in the broader context of reusing the wastewater of other storage facilities, other storage options. Maybe we can come back to this now or a bit later, I don't know. Yeah, I wanted to, maybe we pick this up later around. Let me start first with the European Union, because it would be interesting to hear also from your side a little bit what you think when this new strategy, what is happening with the strategy. So far I understand the dialogue is there at the national level between the governmental institutions, but from the European Union side, you would be, what kind of position you could support in the sense of a wider discussion of these strategies with civil society, with the people in the country, and also how you want to assign or maybe assist the various European and non-European donors in kind of supporting and aligning behind the government and not only having here and there separate donors active.
Okay, too many things. I think sincerely that most of the point needed for a reform of the sector were already in the strategy of 2012. What has been missing is the capacity to measure these, to have indicators, and to communicate properly these strategic objective, and to engage the different stakeholders around these objectives. I think the strategy remained too much on the paper, unfortunately, without creating a common engagement, a common time frame, a common instrument for even for the donors to intervene, in which part they were contributing to this strategy, what were the objectives, what were the commitments that everyone should take part. There was probably not enough ownership by the parts on that. And this lack of ownership, this lack of data, caused the fact that the public, the citizen, did not even know what was coming out from this strategy, what were the progresses. That, in any case, there have been some progresses in all these years. They've not been properly communicated, they've not been shown, quantified, and measured around. I think this is the main problem that has been there. As European Union, as we already mentioned in different occasions, we think that the water and wastewater sector is a crucial sector for Lebanon. We want to really be present and being a reliable donor, just going even beyond the Syrian crisis. That has brought many funds during this period, and unfortunately, I would like to say, not all of them have been put in a common direction, in a clear with a complementary strategy between many donors that have been not coordinating enough also between them. So we want to promote this effort of pushing for more coordination, and really to sit in a coordinated way with the ministry, first of all, that I think there is a new dynamism we see already since she came on board, but also with the new directors of the water establishment, because we really believe that is crucial, this dialogue between the ministry and the water establishment, to define together the strategy to implement projects that are sustainable later, and that could help in breaking this vicious cycle of lack of funds, practically. There is this opportunity now that there are many funds in the sector. Mm-hmm. There is also, with the CIP last year, there is a commitment pledge renewed last week in Brussels with the Brussels conference to support Lebanon. Everyone is aware of the burden Lebanon is facing with the refugee crisis, to support Lebanon. But we need to probably put all these funds to understand where we are going to move in this strategy with these funds. We think that the CIP is an important document that has been there, but it's not clear where this CIP is going to move from the situation we have now, where we are going to arrive with the implementation of strategy. So it's very important to put indicators for this process and to define them together. Last point, sorry, that I always care about is how to communicate all this process. Because we have been mentioning, as been mentioned, there is a need of revision of the tariff. First of all, the one volumetric that has been mentioned many times, I don't think will be perceived with problem by the citizens. The moving to a volumetric tariff will just improve the performance of the network and the water conservation, but will not impact in the cost. But for sure, when we talk about the wastewater tariff, we know that there will be a problem. If you don't build a dialogue, you don't let the citizen have the vision to understand where the sector is going on, what is in act, all the efforts that are done, it will be very difficult to implement that. So I think there is a need of a tool for communicating, publicizing the data, and to create this trust and hope that things can change.
Thank you very much. I think you picked up on another issue, the question of volumetric tariffs. And I remember very well that there was quite a bit of progress in a number of projects. I think one was in one of the former USAID projects, but also in the GIZ project. I think it was a suburb of Saida, where they actually really implemented it and wanted to start, and then was something came in between, a rather top-level interference on the political level, whereas actually people were all happy with it, and the tariff wouldn't have meant for them that they needed to pay more. It was just an internal adjustment about those who pay more are those who actually really consume more, but in general it was not a major increase of a tariff, not at all. So it would be interesting to see also more progress in this direction. That requires funds for the technical aspects, but I think it requires maybe much more effort for the technical issues are normally easy to quantify, easy to calculate and to implement. What you point out is the question of how to better communicate these issues and how to reach to the citizens and that they are actually engaged in the dialogue and the decision making also. I think that's very interesting. Let's move maybe from the pure donor perspective into more the regional aspects, and Ziad, maybe you can give us a bit of an idea how you see this. I mean, you've been working in Lebanon before, but now as with UN-ESCWA, you see a little bit other countries also in the region, and you see, I mean, there are a number of countries in the region who are carrying quite a burden when it comes to the Syrian refugees crisis. What do you see, where is Lebanon actually quite advantaged, or where could they actually do a little bit better when you compare it with some other countries in the water sector? I mean, we have 17 SDGs. I have to interrupt you, so don't talk about all of them.
No, I'm not going to talk about all of them. I'm just going to start actually with the pulling back. I'll start with the strategy in Lebanon, then move to the regional. The strategy at the level that it is, it's a higher level than implementation. And I think most of the main points that we'd like to see in a strategy are there in the strategy. And even the main title, you said the human rights. The title was on the, I remember when I saw the strategy back in 2000, I don't remember, 12, something like that. What grabbed me most of it is the title. On the title page, you read, I'll say it in Arabic and I'll try to translate it. It says, المياه حق لكل مواطن وثروة للوطن, which means that water is a right to each citizen and a resource treasure to the country. So that vision, that human rights vision that we're talking about was already there. Maybe it's not in the, as you say, in each of the implementation policies in it, but I mean the vision was there, and the strategy was talking about surface water. It was talking about, even it talked about reuse of wastewater. It talked about demand management, which a lot of us forget. It talked about artificial recharge. It talked about the enabling environment, and it talked about the lack of staffing, the vacancies, all of that. I think the major problem has been the vision was there, but the implementation was a problem. And there's several reasons. I think Susie could talk about these more and more. So when you look at the regional level, regionally, or let's start globally at a higher level, and I'll go quickly through those. So globally, we have the Agenda 2030 with a water-specific sustainable development goal that talks about ensuring water and sanitation services to all. So that's talking about the global level, but even within that, you're talking also about interlinkages, nexuses. So you can't talk about one global goal, one goal of water without forgetting the other sectors. And I think Susie touched that irrigation. So that's tied to agriculture, food security. So I think what needs to be introduced in more visibly, flush that out more in this strategy is these interlinkages to other sectors. And thinking of a water sector strategy as part of the national development strategy. You start with water, but it affects the health. We're seeing that the water quality, it affects the food security. It has an effect and requirement on the energy. So you see all of these interlinkages. And I think we have to sort of flush that out and spread it across several sectors when we're talking about water. When you come to the regional level, there's an Arab strategy within the League of Arab States, and that's being updated to reflect more on the Sustainable Development Goals and the newer targets. And you have the Unified Gulf Countries Strategy, and that also talks about resources and enabling environment. And there are several national strategies in the region that you can look at. One which is really impressive, what the work that has been done with Jordan, with the limited amount of water that they have. They have a strategy which reflects the higher level, but they have several policies that are tied to these strategies. Policies that talk about investment, talk about climate change, talk about aligning donors, how they interact with the national water sector strategy. So I think the level that we're at with this strategy is satisfactory. There are issues that need to be updated, as Susie said. And then that has to be followed up with a lot of policy work, a lot of implementation. One thing that I would like to see is more on the capacity development side of the strategy. You can give all the money, all the donor money available, all the government money, but if you don't have the absorption capacity for that funding, then you're not going to be able to implement that. That's one. The general directors of the water establishments talk about the lack of staff, and I think that's a crucial aspect of the strategy that has to hit there. And one that I'll start from a human rights-based approach. When we talk about that, we're not just talking about the right to water. We're talking about empowering the citizens, and I think Michelle hit that. Empowering the citizens by giving them information. And one thing that I started to see is actually with Beirut and Mount Lebanon water establishment. They have a very active social media campaign, so that's giving information. You empower citizens by giving them information. And that's the human rights-based approach. And one final thing that I'd like also to see is empowering of women and putting women in decision-making, making them real partners in this water sector. We're very glad to see a woman for the first time at the head of the water sector. But I think we need to also get that mentality, that culture, that women are real partners in this water sector also. Thanks. I hope I didn't take too long.
Well, we have more SDGs to come back to later on. No, but when it comes to these global policies and global agreements, I think what we haven't addressed yet is the aspect of the Paris Agreement and the climate change. I understand that with the SDG debate, we have a very broad development agenda, and there is many aspects what we can address through the national and what we indirectly already did in the old strategy. But I think the new strategy could actually focus a little bit more on making sure that we see this more in water efficiency, that we see this more in wastewater reuse, that we also see this more in water quality and groundwater quality monitoring, because I think that is one of the challenges which I see in many of in the Arab region and many of the countries here in the region, that there is still a lack of capacity and infrastructure to actually monitor surface and groundwater qualities at the national level, to come up with easy data which feeds into indicators and comes back with ideas on this. We have now in Lebanon, we have not only the strategy, but we have actual really also the code de law, and we have the law 221. In that context, where do you see where we can focus on what we can actually stress a little bit more in the sense of reaching such global goals and trying to enhance our efforts in Lebanon? Do you want to add on this a bit more?
I mean, the results of the water code, implementing the water code, will indirectly feed into the global development goals and goals of sustainability. The main things that the water code focuses on is, first of all, having this clear water strategy, which we will be updating, having clear master plans and implementation plans that the water establishments, each one of them is doing in water, wastewater, and irrigation, each one of them at a different stage now. Plus the fact that the water code obliges in some way, let me say obliges, the subscription to the water network, subscription to wastewater, organizes the irrigation sector, includes the concept of pollueur-payeur, those who pollute will pay, and the preservation of the environment. Of course, it goes along with the environmental law 444, but it also stresses on it in the water environment. It also indicates or dictates some شو بيقولوا الجنحة felony. Misdemeanor, maybe. Kind of. So every every action against yeah. Every action against the articles of the water code will be penalized. You have a certain amount of money that people will pay in case they were caught not abiding by the water code. So these, now this is what I have in mind, but these in general will lead to a better, if you want, a better behavior towards the water environment. Even it targets directly the underground water in a few articles. It obliges having a permit for digging a private well, and several other articles that will consequently feed into the sustainable goals. And Law 221, which we all know about, which is we are trying to implement it as comprehensively as possible, but we have to wait for the financial autonomy of the water establishments until we are able to enforce it the way it's written.
You mentioned the enforcement or the regulation of when it comes to the actual implementation of the strategy and actually the regulations on the ground. I remember, I think Ziad, you were involved in the study before with UNDP, the Italian-supported study on the groundwater for Lebanon, with a lot of challenges in the sense of that there are particular regions in the country where majorities of wells are I would say illegal. Not yet legal,
yes.
to say it in a more positive sense. Do you see other opportunities to engage with the owners of these wells? I mean, instead of only threatening with punishment. I mean, I think is there any other way that they can actually get involved?
We are not threatening a punishment for those who are illegally who have illegal wells. The first thing that the ministry has to do is to develop water resources, proper water resources, clean water resources, and surface water resources. Let me emphasize on that. I am someone who is keen on our underground water. This is strategic reserve. I already said it, I don't know, I was talking to someone. This is our strategic reserve. Okay, you asked me a question, but we did not answer it about the dams earlier. It's true, there are lots of dams in our water strategy of 2012. We have to revisit their quantity, okay? But definitely we have to benefit from the rainfall and the precipitation that we have and the snow that we have. We have to profit from that. We have to maintain our river ecosystems, and we have to maintain our natural recharge of our underground water. After that, if this is not enough, then we go into our underground water. But if you want, Lebanon should be benefiting from its surface water. We do treatment plants to treat the water, use the water, and then later on, if it's not enough, if there's so much growth, blah, 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 etc., we will see. We can then do public wells or private wells. I'm talking on, this is my approach to providing water resources. Okay, and this is the approach of 2012. 2012 did not say that we have to rely on our underground water. It said rely on surface water, and then ultimately, if need be, you go to your underground. So this is what we need to emphasize even more in our review of. It's not really we're not reinventing the wheel and the updates. Okay, we are just, if you want, as Ziad said, putting some implementation to our 2012 strategy. See what we have done, where are we in the roadmap, and taking it from there. And if we can improve, we will improve. Okay, and what we need to speed up, we will speed up. There's nothing really new to invent in the 2012 policy or strategy. So yes, the illegal. Once people have enough water from the water establishments, they will not come over for a permit or for a public well or for a private well. Sorry, they will not need that. Maybe even if we have enough proper irrigation channels, enough water for irrigation, they will not use private wells to irrigate their crops. So it's a whole cycle, it's a whole chain, it's an overview. We have to we will not punish citizens because we did not do our job. We will do our job, okay, and then those who will not abide, then we will punish them. But it's not a matter of punishing citizens just. It's not this at all. And we have 60 or maybe 70,000 illegal wells. You're not going to punish all of Lebanon. So this is not the idea. No, of course not. But we have to do the whole chain, and then we'll start penalizing people.
Thank you very much. I've since my heart is in the groundwater, of course, I love to hear that we have now a champion of groundwater in the ministry. It's great. Of course, there were many people dealing with groundwater.
With every public well and every private well, my hearts go with them.
Well, having said that, one has to, of course, see that the snow is surface water and becomes often groundwater, and it's very good to have snow, but snow might be not there all the time. We had years, 2013-14, I don't want to forget this, where we had a major shortage. I mean, there was no tourism, there was no snow. It was a big challenge for Lebanon, but plus that there was actually no water percolating down to the ground, where we had major problems in the springs and rivers, and faced a severe drought in the summer that year. And that brings me a little bit to the question of climate change again. And so I'm coming back to France, because the Paris Agreement has something to do with France also, because I like to see a little bit more of a hint what we can do, where we can align the water sector also with adaptation strategies under the Paris Agreement. I mean, adaptation becomes more and more important under the UNFCCC approaches. Is there a potential where we can mobilize additional funding also for climate change adaptation and then for the water sector?
Well, actually, I guess this issue is very interlinked. Like, this is a multi-sectoral issue first. And I guess there's a common, before answering, I'm not escaping from the answer, if we can mobilize funds. But just a quick comment before actually going on, and it's a comment that actually connects many of the dots. Although raising awareness is one important issue to climate change, to not actually tapping illegal wells, and to many problems, issues of the sector, there is in parallel a very important aspect in which also taps into what Michele was saying of the informed citizen, is the water allocation exercise. We've been hearing about dams, we've been lots of controversy, but are we as people living in this country, Lebanese or not, donors or not, do we actually have the right information about something that is being criticized or something that is being pushed forward? I guess there's an issue of available, reliable data and an allocation exercise. We hear most of the time that water will be moved from an area to feed Beirut in potable, water will be moved from another area to the south, and then we hear about irrigation, and then we hear about climate change, and I guess the key is in a water allocation exercise. And that's if it's snow melt or if it's recuperated water from treated wastewater to be reused, or treated precipitation water, the allocation exercise can actually, and the strategy actually mentions that in scenarios based on the demand scenarios 1, 2, 3, 4, and this would be the way forward into deciding into planning investments, into informing citizens, into facilitating the job of the water establishments. It's really an interconnected issue. Now, going to the question of mobilizing funds for climate change, adaptation, mitigation, and measures. Mobilizing funds, we all know donors do like to mobilize funds. Mobilizing funds is not an issue. Mobilizing funds in the right direction should be the issue. Donors should be aligned to actually fund what needs to be funded and what was actually planned to be covered in O&M and what is the actual need of the country, but nevertheless, what is the resource? What is the state of the resource that we're gonna fund an investment upon? So yes, mobilizing funding for taking into account climate change is possible, but how to take into account climate change is in the allocation and the planning exercise of the investment itself.
More towards adaptive water management. More towards adaptive water management and addressing being more flexible and more resilient as a society to deal with shortage and overflowing water resources. I mean, being more capable of addressing surplus and deficits. That's it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like it's, we're talking about, the keyword would be here resilient investments coming from resilient funds by transitivity.
On water allocation, this is where it's important to have these water meters. How can you allocate water if you don't know the real need of people in every region? So water meters, installing water meters, smart meters, as Dr. Wasim said, this is extremely important because not only maybe the revenue, the tariff will not be higher, or the bill for water to the citizens might not be higher, but what will be definitely lower is the cost of production of water establishments. And once the cost of production of water establishments decreases, they have some reserve money to place somewhere else. So we did not stress enough on the importance of water meters. I mean, to donors, I'm telling you, please help water establishments. Please try your best to see how we can install water meters in the fastest way possible. And this was also included in 2012 strategy and needs to be focused on more.
Michele, you want to add something on the donors also? Because I would like to open the discussion again, that we have some more feedback also from the group.
But I think when we talk about climate change in Lebanon and talking about resilience of the people, I think the Lebanese population is one of the most resilient I saw in the world. I've been in many countries. They are dealing already with, apart the refugees, but the actual situation of the service. Everyone has a coping strategy already to deal with the problems of water. I would like, starting from that, I think there are a lot of margins of improvement and to create a positive vision. The problem, we have to change this negative attitude of the people don't believing that always we get worse. There are so many margins of improvement in the water sector in Lebanon that to get to pick these low-hanging fruits, it's quite easy. Water meters is one of the points. There are some blockages that should be solved altogether. We cannot expect the donors to solve the problem if there is no ownership by the Lebanese population and institution to solve the problems. And because we can, for sure, water meters is the way forward that will improve not just in terms of water resource conservation, in terms of better management, but also will let the system works technically how they should. Because one of the biggest problems, technically, the way you design the network are designed for, I would say with the European standard in a certain way, the way they are calculated, considering that people close the tap. But if people don't close the tap, you will always have part of the villages, of the municipalities that do not get water. So that will improve also technically the performance of the system and the trust. we are financing water meters. We have already brought in the project, but still there is not a common vision about how to go forward on this, about how to change and apply the tariff, because installing the water meters without going with a volumetric tariff beyond is just a waste of money. So we need to discuss and agree on the time frame for this implementation, and to put it even to agree where we install water meters, we apply one tariff, waiting for the other place to go on. There are experts in the sector. No, we have to have water meters everywhere. In this certain area, they break the water meters as soon as you install them, because they say this will damage. I think this is where we need a better kind of planning, a common vision, shared vision.
Exactly. With the general directors of the water establishments we were talking a while ago, this is the way forward with the ministry from now on. We will be coordinating everything, and definitely on top of our priorities is the tariff, and maybe we will have tariff by blocks, or we will see how to do it. We will see how to, and Oxfam are helping us also with the study for the Bekaa water establishment that we hope can be replicated on the other water establishments, the methodology to approach the changes in tariff. Plus, it's very important to note one thing that I already talked with Oxfam about, is not only the tariff is not just a number that we're going to plug in. Changing the tariff is a change in social attitude. It's a social acceptance, and it definitely has to be aligned with the economic situation of the citizens. We're not going to put a very high tariff just because the water establishments are losing money. No, it's going to be a fair one, but also citizens will have to meet us halfway. We talked about communication strategy, and this is something that is on our agenda, also on the minister's agenda. We will be doing a communication strategy for water, especially to inform people and citizens on what's going on. What do we have? What are our strategies, our plans? What are we implementing? And people need to be informed, because no one is ignorant anymore. However, we are not providing the information. Just dumping the information on the website might not be enough. Not everyone will go and check the website. So from now on, we're going to reach the people and tell them the story. And this is something we'll be working on. Hopefully, maybe in the next forum, we will present all of these things.
Thank you very much. I think it comes back to the aspect of communicating. I mean, I think Lebanese are actually champions in communicating among each other and also to the outside in many different languages and many different aspects. And I think we have a few champions for communication strategies here, even in the room, in different sectors. So I believe there is a lot what we can engage with, and it's not only the dumping of the data somewhere, it's really about engaging with the citizens. And I think you had approaches like this. The ministry was involved in the past when you broke down the national strategy in regional dialogues. These kind of things, I think, have to be reactivated in the context of the different regions to get in discussions with the different citizens. We've seen it in the waste sector. The Lebanese citizen demands information and dialogue. And I think through this, you can find probably the best approaches in the country, taking the citizens serious. But let me move back into the audience. Maybe we have some more discussions. We have not really addressed much on aspects on energy use in the water sector, which could link to climate change funds. But maybe other aspects which are of interest. We started with a discussion earlier in the first row, so I would rather suggest we start in the middle and then go higher up. We have half an hour, if I'm correct. So if there are more, please, again, very short questions if possible, so that we can have different feedbacks from different people.
Thank you very much. Regarding the strategy, updating the strategy, the 2012 strategy supposedly was based on the premise of integrated water resource management. Unfortunately, we didn't see that much. Are you going to updated, meaning what is achievable, what has been achieved, and what's not achieved? Are you going to really self-criticize it and see where can we go? Thank you.
Hadi, you want to introduce yourself also?
Oh, sorry, Hadi Tabbara, Lebanese Economic Association. Oh.
Hi, my name is Elza Marraoui. I'm a consultant for international organization on the subject of gender. And I would like to ask a question to Ziad Khayyat. You said that women are real partners in the water sector. And I would like you to elaborate a bit more, and maybe others in the panel. First, I would like to know if there are data available or there are like ongoing studies on this subject to know if women, but also maybe population from certain regions are more or less touched by unavailability of water, how water is used, like regarding the different sectors, agriculture, industry, domestic use, and how this impact on women. Let's say if a woman are more in the domestic area, are they are like they have access more to water, less to water? Is it something that is ongoing? Is it studied right now? Thank you.
That would be actually an interesting aspect, maybe also to see if they can be addressed in the new strategy a bit more specifically. Could be.
Hi, Joanna from GVC, one of the partners in the project. We have quite a lot of evidence from the past projects on convincing the population and having very regular engagement in the communities where we're providing infrastructure support, etc., on convincing them to subscribe and even to pay. And the impression that we have through also creating something like civil water units or water champions groups is that citizens are actually quite willing to change. They're open to change. They're open to having meters installed. They're open for payment. They consider the payment not much higher than what they have because they spend so much on the alternative resources. And my question would be, however, we have the feeling that sometimes the other sides are not really ready yet, necessarily don't have the resources and the capacities to respond to these willingnesses and requests from the citizens. So since you're saying that, my question is directed to Susie, on if you have a communication strategy at national level and then at maybe water establishment level, as we're seeing, they have increased Facebook campaigns, etc. But how do you make this trickle down? Because the citizens often do not know that they can go and ask the ministry or realize that they can have an interlocutor at the water establishment. They talk to each other and they talk to their maybe municipalities. So how do you make this trickle down so that people know where to address themselves to and who to hold accountable for which aspects? Thank you.
Hello, I'm Sana Saliba from USAID. I would like to address the point related to the meters and meters installation that everybody is promoting. However, my question is about the capacity to read those meters, to analyze the information, to make use of those meters. Besides that, creating awareness among the people that they should they should abide and install meters. How are we taking advantage of the fact that we're moving towards the strategy of installing meters? And I would like also to reiterate on the question that was raised by my colleague here about the results that can we talk about results from the previous from the existing water strategy that we intend to update?
Can I answer?
Yeah, I think we should actually get back to answering first and then we go to another one.
Let me start with Mr. Tabbara. Yes, of course. The first thing that we're going to do is see where we are. The strategy has a roadmap. 2012 strategy has a clear roadmap of targets in 2015 and 2020. And we want to see where we are from these targets. Where are the gaps and what we need to do. And based on this, we can continue our master plans and our strategy and our implementation plans. So we cannot do without knowing what we have done already. Plus, we should not forget that the donors community and the NGOs have done a lot. And this is a lot of information that we need to collect and integrate with the projects that we have done as ministry and as water establishments and integrate with them what the NGOs have done since 2011. So once we have all of this done, then we know where to go from there. Joanna, regarding your question, communication strategy has several audiences, okay, and you will target each audience in a different way or with a different channel or with different means. So if I'm targeting politicians, it's a certain way. If I'm targeting citizens, it's another way. And definitely there will be public consultations, would be public presentations in major cities and major villages. This is how I see it. I don't know, communication specialists, please advise. So we have to go there by ourselves, and we have to trickle the communication from the ministry to the water establishments to the municipalities down to the citizens. So there are several channels through which we can get to the citizens, but we want to reach them, I would say one by one, if it's possible, but this is the objective. You need to inform. Like it's a classroom and yet there are students. You have to reach everyone. So this is how we hope it will happen. As for the lady, smart meters, when you say smart meters, it's never installing a smart meter and leaving it there. When there's a smart meter, there's a backstage advanced metering AMI center or a SCADA system or whatever it is, a digital system that can read all of the information you have on your meters, and this information will be analyzed by specialized people, which we hope we will have in the water establishment. Yes, we hope we will have, definitely. I cannot say we will have, we hope we will have. And we are working on that. The director generals know these needs, and they are working very hard on having the experts they need. And once you have experts who can analyze the data, then you can make use of them and you can optimize your demand and your supply.
One question was still open about gender, women, and
oh, yes,
disintegration of
but
information.
this was for Ziad.
Yes, classically the approach has been to women as receiving a service. So if they don't get the service or how that affects their daily life, if they have to go collect. And I think that's valid, okay, but in the local context, it's more the effect is more empowering women to be leaders and true stakeholders in this sector. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about training them to be water leaders, to be more involved in this sector. One way to do it is through training, education for women, having funding for that. Another way is funding special small businesses for women that deal with this water sector. You can even go as far as having quotas. I'm not saying 50-50 in the field of water sector, but at least having something. An example is having a 30% quota, where you either have the minimum is 30% of any gender. So you either have a minimum of 30% women or 30% of men. So you have at least that quota to start with in the water establishments, in the water ministries. I mean, I love having the 4 general directors here, but they're all men. At least, I mean, you could have a quota that at least one of the 4 would be a woman, and I'm sure capable. The minimal minister is but I mean, moving that through the water sector. I mean, there's a lot of women that are not going to that sector, and I think that can be done either through regulations in the ministry and in the government overall, or it can even be done with the funding agencies, where part of that funding goes to empowering women, either through training, capacity training, or funding small projects for them.
I think also what is interesting is already, we see already currently with all the funds which came into Lebanon due to the Syrian crisis, that there was always very careful disintegration of measuring how many Lebanese, how many Syrians, how many other refugees have benefited. We should focus also from the donor side properly even more on an effort to disintegrate also how much women have benefited, how much, and actually try to get this data specifically out for how we fund different activities in the country. It's difficult in some cases, but sometimes it's good to monitor the beneficiaries of such projects.
I have a very small note on this gender thing because I've been asked about it before. It's not about the doors you open to women. It's about the education you give the woman, and the doors will be open. No one will close a door if a woman is well educated, if she trusts herself, if she's self-confident, and if she has the knowledge that, quote unquote, a man has. It's not about a quota, or it's not about allowing her in this sector or in that sector. I don't agree. I agree on one thing we should focus on: educating women. Educating women of all ages, of all religions, in all regions in Lebanon. And from there on, they will be strong enough to tackle all the sectors and all the fields that they like to work in. It's not, even if I put 30% of women in the water sector or in the Ministry of Energy, and none of them has a degree to be an engineer or to be in the Ministry of Energy and Water. What can I do with that? I can't do anything. There's no 30% quota. It will remain a gap. So it's all about education. This is what I believe in. So
I wanted to. I want to leave it here. No? Just a small comment on Dr. Tarabai's and Joanna's questions. First, I'm sure the ministry will be revising, like it's supposed to be. The strategy, any revision of strategy is actually based on lessons learned, and not only lessons learned. We would wish also to see in the performance indicators, not to show what happened, also to show what happened, but also to set feasible goals and the transition that passed by a transition period towards setting up new ones in the future. That's one. Two, on your question, Joanna, in the TA package that Olivier and Michele mentioned, that the European Union is delegating to AFD to support the ministry and the water establishments, there will be, apart from a communication strategy to support the ministries on communication strategies, we were discussing right now the idea of an observatory of water and energy that would actually engage and animate public policy discussions, and also bring common reading of the progress of the reform in both sectors, and at the same time of the problems and the issues that are blocking or unblocking any progress in the sector.
Okay, I would like to get back to you and listen. Yeah, you see, I'm sorry, I have to go first higher up because we had the first. Can I? You have already a microphone. That's actually very tricky. But I want to hear you. I want to hear you. And also there is a hand very far up. This is number 4 then. But that's, sorry, this is 5. Well, the first 4. And please try to be short. I keep number 5 on my mind, but I don't know if you can make it to 5. Yeah, you start, please.
I start. Okay, hi. This is Sarah Osman from NRC. I'm a monitoring and evaluation coordinator. And I'm so happy to hear that your interest in indicators and in data and so on. And I've heard about the lack of data and lack of proper M&D system. So I would like to know, how does the M&D system in the ministry look like, especially for the new strategy that you're aiming for? And what kind of support you would need to establish and make the M&D system efficient? And I'm wondering, I also want to ask the panelists how you can also support the public sector in building and implementing a proper M&D system for water. Thank you.
Hello. Sorry. We are not asking the ministry to punish people, but maybe they can collect money from people who has already wells and put some metering to their usage, which is the law. It's not a matter No, it's possible to have meters on wells and collect some money and regulate, because in fact we don't need so much resources in water. In fact, we don't know, but my feeling, sorry, my name is Roger Melki and I worked already on
أهلا وسهلا سامعة كثير باسمك هلا
بالمنيح.
إيه بالكثير منيح.
Sorry. So that's why it's not a matter only of resources. Second, we have a hybrid system to management, because we created 4 water establishment, and still the main decision are taken on the level of the Ministry of Water, or even on the Ministry of Finance, because specifically for tariffication. So maybe also what we need some baseline data. You started on the demand side. We know better now, but it's not enough, because how much are we distributing water before, for supply. For supply, it's, that's right. And after we can go to improve our demand. But until now, we don't know exactly what we are producing water, how many resources we have. And also we have to improve this information and maybe give establishment some competition between them. Until now we have 4 companies, or we are supposed to have 4 private companies, because you can privatize 1 or 2 or 3, whatever. So to give more flexibility and take off the central decision of the government in all of sectors. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Jihad Farah, Lebanese University. Thank you for this talk. My question is to Ms. Houayek. It's in the Code de l'eau, in fact, there are 3 articles that focus, at least 3 articles that focus on water basin strategies. Articles 23, 24, 26, if I'm not wrong. They focus on water basin strategies. And for me, it's an interesting idea, since it's a scale on which water cycles and urbanization, as an urban planner I'm talking, they really articulate on this level. And at the administrative level, we have on one side the water establishment who address issues in a technical and administrative reform way, from what I heard in the morning. And we have municipalities that are most focused on their own territorial logic, micro-territorial logic on the other hand. And actually, for now, they don't really intersect. And in the morning, there was a long talk about the gap between municipalities and water establishment and the relation between them. My question is, in the revision you are doing and the decrees you are looking into now in developing the Code de l'eau, how will you address this watershed or water basin plans, strategies issue?
Maybe a last question. Please try to be also short. But I think let's see.
I'll be short. Hi everyone, I'm Bernadette from Jan Ocha. I think if we need to improve something, we need to fully understand it first. So how confident are we and how knowledgeable are we about what we have currently? So for example, in our water networks, and is there anything in the water strategy that talks about building hydraulic models, understanding really what we have in the ground and how can we improve it? Thank you.
That was a short question, though we have time for number 5 also.
It's okay. We am Sukari, engineer, NRC. We attended a conference in the Syndicate of Engineers recently, and one of the things we came out that the latest studies done in Lebanon was in 1972. The studies for the actual situation of water inside Lebanon. So is the ministry planning to update these studies? Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, these are multiple questions, but I think maybe we can try to answer them also with some additional support, because Susie, you want to start before your voice is...
Sarah, hi. Long time. Sarah, monitoring and evaluation, as Rami was saying, and as the other colleagues also were saying, it's important to build, if you want, a monitoring and evaluation system in the new water strategy. Somewhere maybe it was missing in the 2012, especially that we did not have performance indicators or we did not have indicators of progress. So from now on, if we have indicators in our update, it will be easy for us to monitor and to evaluate at the end of the day and to see where we are. And definitely one of the important things that we need also is to enhance real-time supervision. It means when there is a project being implemented, we have to, but the problem is that we do not have enough staffing. But had we had enough engineers in the ministry, supervising implementation of projects is a very, very, very important issue that we need to address, because we have to supervise the contractors. This is one. Mr. Milky, was there a question or was it a statement? Is there a possibility to see the... Yes. Okay, it's a must to put a meter on private wells. A meter is put, right? On private wells. On public wells also. On illegal wells, which we don't know where they are, and how deep they are. So the water code obliges people يعملوا تسوية أوضاع. Okay, بتسوية الأوضاع we can know those who will come. We can know what is their private well about, and we can put meters and we can make them pay like we make the private wells pay. But besides that, we do not have enough staffing to go after those illegal wells. Of course, and the objective, Mr. Milky, as I said before, is to stop having these wells and to develop enough resources so that the water establishment can be is able to supply all the citizens.
We had something on modeling.
Yes, Lebanese University. You asked me. Yes. Well, this is a very. This made an issue for us, honestly. The water code was written back in 2005, and when we did the modifications in last year, we did not pay attention. It's not that we did not pay attention, but the committee that was doing the study did not want to change this aspect of doing a strategy based on watersheds. Now, the problem that we have is the overlap between the watersheds and the administrative mandate of water establishments. Plus, don't forget that we have the LRA, the Litani River Authority as well, that is responsible for irrigation in the Litani Basin. So, either we go into this nitty-gritty work of dividing the mandates of the administrations and the LRA to do the strategy based on watersheds, or we find a way out to update the strategy the way we are so that it doesn't take much more time and so that we do not go into political conflicts and have our updated roadmap soon enough. This is more of a political problem than it is of a technical problem, and I don't think we're going to tackle the update of the strategy based on watersheds. Plus the fact that Lebanon has 16 or 17 basins. And if you want the idea behind doing the strategy based on watershed management is to have a director for each basin. This was the initial idea. And when you have 17 directors, I don't think it's going to work in Lebanon. With 4 directors مش مخلصين. 17 ما بعرف. يعني كلكم خير وبركة عم بمزح. بس إنه it is a problem for us. But I don't think we're going to go through this.
Susie, our time is a bit
yes,
short.
Our time is finishing.
Can we try to address the other two quickly?
The hydraulic modeling. In the strategy itself, we do not go in hydraulic modeling. In designing the project, we go in hydraulic modeling. I cannot, I mean, there should be a certain supply demand, a certain balance, a certain hydraulic, how can I, there should be an hydraulic exercise so that I can do the modeling. Usually when they are designed, when a consultancy firm designs a network, especially nowadays, not in the 50s. Nowadays, this is how it should be. I will be supervising those who will design. But usually the design is, if you're a hydraulic engineer, you know that it only happens on a software that does hydraulic modeling. And definitely, the hydraulic model will tell you how it works. Otherwise, you will not know at which altitude you will put your reservoir or which diameter you will design your networks, etc., etc. There was one more question.
Can I compliment a bit
Yes,
on this,
please.
if you don't mind? In any case, it's true that, in my opinion, we don't know enough. There are a lot of projects, technical studies and everything, but there is not the capacity to capitalize them. We keep doing projects implemented, everyone does his own hydraulic model, but at the end, the hydraulic model is not handed over to the right institution. The institutions are not able to keep a database of them, and whenever there is a problem in that network, no one knows exactly where is the pipe, what are the problems, and they rebuild the network. That's unfortunately, the approach in Lebanon is always to start and rebuild instead of taking the opportunity to study what is existing through the data you have compiled and re-put them together. If I can make just a comment, because I've heard a lot of time enforcement of the law, legal situation. Okay, the legal framework is very important. Everyone agree on that to understand the role of everyone. But I don't know. I've been a few years here in Lebanon. I remember when there was the new code of the road a few years ago. Everyone was happy about that. But then I never saw a policeman giving a fine in the street. The fact that we believe that just the legal framework is going to solve the problem of enforcement of law in Lebanon, I think is a false illusion. I think there are economic margin for the people to stop using wells and other things by providing a reliable service. What they are paying now is more or less, on average, 3 times what they should pay with a normal tariff. Let's tap on this, on the economic interest of the people to become legal. And let's see, instead of trying to find the responsible to chase them, that for sure is important on our side, but what are the strategies to bring people back to legality? Because there are people that have 15 years of debt in certain area where the service was not reliable or no one was passing to collect them. There are plenty of these cases. How to find a solution of a partial amnesty or other kind of intervention to tap on those people and bring them back to legality, to don't let them hide when sometime Beate was telling, let's be a propositive aspect to legality. How people want to go back to legality. Not everyone, but
Michele, you're very lucky that you are the donor and you've sponsored the project which allows us to have the Lebanon Water Forum. Thank you. That's why I didn't cut you. No, thank you very much, all panelists. If any last word, because I think the time is actually moving into. I know we haven't addressed the last question, but
I just want to say thank you for the urban planning perspective. I guess it's a discipline that should integrate every sector planning in Lebanon. So I just wanted to highlight that if the water code at the end would work at basin/watershed scale or not, and whether the Agence de Bassin would be created or not, having a perspective of urban planning in the technical ministries, not working on the urban, but taking into consideration as water planning as part of the urban planning exercise to the whole country is really important.
Yeah, I think that's very important. Any other last words in the moment? Otherwise, Ziad, you want to add?
Yes,
National assessments.
The 1972, yeah, it was. There was a study done in 2013 by UNDP on groundwater. It's called Assessment of Groundwater in Lebanon. If you want, you can check it on the UNDP website. It's a very good study. Ziad, in fact, can talk about it, not me. He was the coordinator, the focal point at the ministry at the time.
It was about oil surface. I mean, like.
The climate change has been addressed by the Ministry of Environment usually, and they've used a study done by ASQA to report on their commitments to the Paris Agreement. So it's being looked at, but I think what Susie touched and everyone touched is the interlinkages that we need to look at. And I'll just leave with two things maybe. We're talking about water allocation and meters at households, but the biggest consumer is the agriculture sector. And I think we need to have a conversation on what food security, what agriculture strategy in this country with the available water. And I think that's big for another forum maybe. And talking about giving confidence to the people. And I think one of the examples that I really like is the example in Palestine. With all the problems that they have, in the law, there's a water sector regulatory council which oversees and regulates all of the water service providers. And I think that could be something we could discuss that might give people some confidence in the water sector.
And I would propose, to get out with something concrete, I would propose, can we engage ourselves to have on a 6 months basis or something like this, update about the progresses of the strategy and the commitment also from the donor side toward this strategy, and to publish it.
I think that would be already a nice point forward. I think we need to see this.
I'm asking the different partners if we can, in principle, agree on this point.
Yeah.
This is the update of the strategy, but to monitor the implementation of the strategy and to
yes,
publish
Michele,
it.
What I said in my opening note, this is what we need to do. From now until the next water forum, there will be fora in the ministry, and we will update the stakeholders and everyone who is involved in the water sector, where we are and what we have done. And definitely, I don't know, from the bigger audience, whoever wants to attend or whoever wants to come to the ministry and ask about things, please do not hesitate. Our doors are open.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you very much. I think these doors are open is actually a good point. We are actually closing this panel now, but we are opening immediately. And thank you very much to the panelists and the engaged discussion also with the people. We are not... Thank you. There is no coffee break. I'm supposed to tell you that there's no coffee break. I'm very sorry. But instead of coffee, we have now the next panel immediately after. And we are moving from policy and strategy into finance. I think that's also very tricky and very challenging. Thank you.
Test, test.
Thank you so much. Having a discussion.
Thank you. Nice meeting you.
Okay, I'll stay with you.
All right, good.
See?
Stick
Together.
Yes. We have each other's back. Okay.
And I'm glad that there's gender imbalance. We are
Yes,
more
yes.
women than men.
Yes.
That's something.
Sami is a moderator. And I don't count. This is the gender balance.
What
take. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Sami Atalla. I'll be the moderator for this session. I'm the executive director of the Lebanese Center for Policy Studies, and thank you very much for inviting me to moderate this session. So water, I believe you've been spent today, in fact, talking about the water establishments and the policies. What this session is going to be doing is going to focus on the investments, right? So we all know that we have a water shortage. We all know that we need more water. We all know essentially that demand is above supply. So how do we actually rectify this shortage? Also, the Lebanese government went to SED for a list of more than 280 projects, and there is a good section or sector which is going to be spent on the water. So what I'd like to do today in this next hour and 15 minutes is to discuss with our panelists, get their views on what are the investment plans, obviously of the government, particularly the CDR, and what is the World Bank doing about this, because we also have the World Bank with us, as well as other donors who are also present. I'm going to quickly sort of introduce them. I have Dr. Wafa Sharafuddin from CDR, who's going to give us this perspective. We have Dr. Hanan Fawaz from KfW Development Bank. We have Rami Wahbi from USAID, and Amal Talibi from the World Bank. So I'm going to go straight into this, and the way it's going to be organized is that I'm going to be sort of asking them, it's going to be more of a Q&A, so I'm going to go back and forth with them on certain questions, and then after probably 30 minutes or 40 minutes or so, I'm going to open to the floor and get your feedback and questions, all right? So Dr. Sharafuddin, so can you just tell us now that, as we all know, we have a shortage of water. I know that there's been many plans on investing into the water sector. Maybe it's very useful to know what's going on, how much investments is going to happen. We know we got around maybe $3 billion just for the water sector from SED. Probably there are other sort of investments into the sector. But I think it would be a very good idea just to start getting a sense of what are the investments and how they fit the national strategy, and then we can sort of link it up to SED. So please, I give you the floor, and you have a microphone.
Thank you. If we can, maybe I can start by talking about 3 issues,
please.
3 topics. One, what in terms of investment, in terms of investment, what is the role of the CDR in the investment in Lebanon, and mainly in the water sector? And then what's the volume of ongoing, let's say, investment actually in the sector in water supply, wastewater, and irrigation? Because I don't know if you're talking about only the water supply or you covered the 3 subsectors. And then for the third point on the forward from going forward, then what the plans and so. Then for the first point and the CDR role, we are a government agency linked to we report to Council of Ministers. And we work as a for the ministry. We are not the owner of any sector where we implement project. We implement project on behalf of the ministry concerned and the water establishment concerned. Then and we implement priorities or plans approved by the government. Then, like, if we can, in a summary, like for the reconstruction phase, the priority in the 90s was for this sector was reconstruction of the damaged systems, let's say on the water and wastewater. Then re-establish the existing situation of the utilities and sector and the different element. Then we had like a plan at that time to have 2 main issues increase the in the level of service and cleaning the supply, then every much related to the water treatment at that time, rehabilitation of water treatment. Like we started by Dubai, the main treatment plant at that time, and then the other all the element related to the quality of the water and the different linkages or networks really, and the reservoir. This is the program of the 90s. It was not too much about the additional resources, because it was tackled like in the following the 2000. And the main issue was at that time, the 90s, it's the reform of the sector, where we were part with the other agency involved into the new law. This was approved in the 2000 and with the law 221 of then, and the creation of the 4 water establishment: Beirut, Mount Lebanon, South, North, and Bekaa, and then plus the Litani Authority. Then this reform was done in 2000 and followed by the implementation decree in 2005. And following that, this reform, then the role, our counterpart became like for each area, the water establishment, and of course the ministry for the overall strategy. And our role, we was during this time, we replied to requests coming from the Council of Ministers for certain program to implement or to secure funding, because we have this the 3 major rule. One, it's the planning and proposing program for the investment to the government for approval, and second, implement project decided or following the Council of Ministers decision, and third, searching for funding, negotiate loans on behalf of the other ministry. Then following this period, I will come to the 2010 when the first strategy for the water sector was approved by the government. And following that, we are working together with the ministry on different level based on their priority. Then this is for the first part of your question.
Let me just quickly ask you here. So at what point, because you said in the 90s you were doing more sort of cleaning up and sort of services, at what point, which year essentially were the investments, you started doing really investment in the supply, right? Because that in the 90s that was not the focus. Because I'd like to sort of ask you that, because I mean, when we're talking about the water, we all know there's a shortage, right? And we all know we need to increase the supply, but there's also, we know there's a lot of sort of waste leakages and so forth, right? From the demand side. So I just want to see maybe just to put the two things together, the supply and the demand, you know, and if you can sort of tell me what you're doing in both, because I also sort of, I think it's important just to highlight those two.
This topic was very much discussed during the 90s and with the donors mainly, because at that time, since we had a lot of losses in the existing system, then the idea was to improve the systems more than because you will gain like if you have losses in like 65%, then it's not helpful if you add the supply, because you will lose more water. Then the priority was put at that time onto improvement of the network and of the all the related system reservoir, and so to decrease this losses, because you will gain and with if you analyze the cost is much more beneficial. But when you came to the after the 2010 with the improvement of the system, if you look at the area of Beirut and Mount Lebanon, which is you can find when we had one study. It was financed from. It was prepared by the bank at that time. We with the ministry and to look on the for water establishment the level of service. You find out that this in the area where you have the higher density of population, which is Beirut and Mount Lebanon, and you have the high level of collection also, because this is very important. In this area, you have the bigger shortage of supply. Then you need in that area, whatever you do into the improvement of the network, you could not have the supply like half time, or you need to have additional supply, and this is what was the the discussion behind the project of Awali to end the following Bisri Dam, to have additional capacity of the additional water supply to this area to really to supply the basic need of that big area.
Okay, great. I'm going to come back to you on a few questions, but Amal, I want to ask you about the World Bank has been investing a lot on this, right? Could you just tell us, what you've been doing, both maybe on the supply side and the demand side? And let's focus first on the investments. Give us sort of an overview of what's the strategy in terms of the investments. That would be really useful.
Very good. Thank you very much. So, like Wafa was saying, and like Susie was saying, we have the National Water Strategy, and the World Bank, at the request of the government, has been really supporting, and I would say the three pillars. The first one, which is providing the bulk water, which means augmenting the sources of water. In our case, one of the projects is the Bisri Dam. At the same time, because you have to, the story is securing water for the people. So the people have the water in summertime when they need it the most, is how we can get that extra. At the same time, and I really want to emphasize, it's a parallel work. You also work on the demand. So part of our project has been also to put flow meters, the smart meters in Beirut, Mount Lebanon. It has been also working on the reduction of leakages, and we are launching, the Beirut Mount Lebanon is launching the performance-based contract. So really changing from not just saying we will rehabilitate the network to say no, the contractor will come and will have a target. This is what they need to achieve as a reduction of losses. So very much the demand side, how do you reduce the losses? The third one, which is also important and was also in the strategy, is the whole story on the governance, is the whole story on the revenues. How do you increase the revenues to be able to operate and maintain your system? Because it's not only building, but also how do you operate, how do you maintain, and the whole communication. Keep communicating with the public. And Susie said something very important to say before you ask people why they are overusing the groundwater, why they're going for illegal wells, provide them the alternative. And the alternative is exactly what we are working with the government, with other donors. The Islamic Development Bank is also one of the financier of, co-financier of our project, is how do we provide the water, safe drinking water, and I want to insist that it's not just the bulk water, but also the water quality, how it reaches safely Beirut, Mount Lebanon. So it's really much the story of securing water, and what we see globally, because that's something very important, is all the cities and all the countries that have been able to secure water, they have been diversifying their sources of water. So try to use the sources, the surface water, the groundwater, the non-conventional water. It's not just one. You need all of the sources, because if one system fails, you have the backup. So it's the whole story of also redundancy in the system. So that has been very much the discussion and the dialogue and how we're working on with the government of Lebanon.
Very good. I'm going to come back to you on the safety issue. But Rami, you've mentioned sort of earlier, just outside, what you've been working on with USAID in terms of the water sector and your focus. Maybe you can just tell us first what you've been doing, what USAID has been doing, what sort of projects, and how does it fit within sort of the larger sort of national plan?
Okay.
First, thank you for staying after lunch. That's highly appreciated. Similar to what Amal mentioned, what USAID is doing is, first, it's in line with the National Water Sector Strategy. And as a refresher, USAID is the US Agency for International Development. It's been active in Lebanon since the 1960s. And we've been active in the sector since the year 2005, after the reformation of the water establishments and the Law 221. And the spirit of the assistance is to support the water establishments and the 5 public water utilities in delivering a better water service. Since then, we have invested around $180 million in the water sector. That included more than 200 kilometers of networks and around 40,000 household meters and zone meters. Dozens of management tools to the water establishments, and a number also of wastewater treatment plants along the Litani. What USAID does is we try to optimize on the supply and work on the demand management. We try to address these two main themes in our assistance. And what I mean by optimizing on the supply is upgrade whatever facilities are there, reduce the losses, reduce the non-revenue water. And when we work on the demand management, is also part of it is the installation of the meters, because you will not be able to do any demand management if you cannot quantify it. And we also have the 2 softer components of the demand management is the engagement of the civic society, the municipalities, and the end user. The end user is the consumer, and you cannot solve any issue without involving the end user. And we're also active on involving the private sector and trying to find opportunities for how the private sector can be engaged before we reach the ultimate PPP concept. At this stage, we're trying to see what the private sector can bring into the table under the water sector. Today, we are funding a $65 million project. It's called the Lebanon Water Project. It has started since September 2015. It ends in September 2020. And it again works within the same spirit. It has a component for the support of the water utilities and a component for engaging the civil society, the communities, the municipalities. And by the way, when I say municipalities, it's not giving municipalities assistance to provide water service. It's encouraging the municipalities to coordinate with the utilities where they are doing an interim job of delivering the water service, with the ultimate potential of transferring all this water supply responsibility to the water establishments. And of course, there's the third component that I mentioned, which is the private sector engagement.
Very good, thank you. Hanan, can you tell us more what you're doing on the, in terms of also as a donor, how you're working with the ministry and with CDR? What are the plans, investment plans that you've been sort of undertaking in the last few years?
It's a pleasure. We are the German Development Bank of the German government, and we are mostly funded by the BMZ. You may have heard of it. It's the Ministry of Cooperation and Economic Development. This ministry has 3 major agencies working in cooperation, of which we are the one focusing on infrastructure. So we don't really, it's not our focus to work in the governance sector. There we have our colleagues who are also represented here. And we work more on the supply side. KfW has been working in the past, in the far past, before the refugee crisis, directly with CDR in supporting all what Dr. Wafa was saying, mainly through loans. So since the Syrian refugee crisis and since the German government increased the cooperation, intensified cooperation with Lebanon, we have been investing in infrastructure, water supply infrastructure and wastewater infrastructure, mainly in communities affected the most by the refugee crisis, so host communities. We invest in everything, in water supply pipelines, in reservoirs, in the rehabilitation of water treatment plants. We also finance wastewater networks, but we're not financing wastewater treatment plants anymore. But we were the ones who financed the Ghadir wastewater treatment plant, which was the first urban wastewater treatment plant in Lebanon, if I'm not wrong. So this is what we are doing at the moment, and our engagement is split into the bilateral work directly with the government, which is always in close coordination with the Ministry of Energy and Water, and also in coordination with CDR and with regard to the portfolio that's implemented by CDR. And we have another part of our engagement, which is through UN organizations and NGOs, international NGOs.
Very good. So here's a question. I'm going to open it up to all the panelists. So we know we have a shortage. We know we've been talking about investments, supply. We've been also talking about the demand. So let me sort of maybe go back one more step and say, what's really the problem? Why, as a citizen, you know what I mean? Let's just go out of the technicalities. And I feel like, wait a minute, I feel there's a water problem, right? We will buy water, you know what I mean? I think most households do. We don't get it, it's not clean, and so forth. So let me just sort of, what's really the issue here? Is it we're not spending enough? We're not investing enough? We're not investing the money well? So we're securing the money, but we're not doing it well. Is it the issue of more of the demand? I mean, I think the demand issue you've been working on, I think, Wafa, you mentioned the demand, but you think you can improve the demand, but only to a certain point, because you obviously need to increase the supply. So what's really the issue here? You know, and maybe Wafa, let's go back to you, sort of, you know, if you can put your finger on the real issue.
The question is large. I think it's not only about technical problem and technical solution. Let's say about investment. We had like a period where we didn't have any investment really in the sector because of shortage of the budget. From, let's say, from 1999 till like 2010, and we had like 10 years with very low investment in the sector. And also with all the political problem we had during that period after 2005, during the no government or not between bracket government or whatever, lot of investment program financed by donor took a lot of time to be approved and to be put in execution. Also problem on the government side and water establishment. You have certain following 205, we had the like the decree for implementation for the new establishment, but the staffing, the issue of collection, this is very serious. In many of the water establishment, when you have the rate of collection is 18% in one of the water establishment, you could not, as a establishment, you could not cover the operation cost. And then when you are not able to cover the operation costs, you will have a problem of supply for the people covered by this water utility. Then the issue of collection is important, and you had the basic need for the, if the government, central government will implement certain schemes, but at the end the day-to-day operation of the sector is with the water establishment, and then if they don't have enough enough collection to cover all the need for for the supply, then you will have problem in the as a beneficiary at the end of the circle. Then you are not receiving. Plus, in certain area you need to invest in the systems to have additional water, as I mentioned, for the greater for Beirut and Mount Lebanon. You had the shortage. Whatever you do, your need is you have water quantity 25% of your needs. How you can supply. Although you are paying your bill, then in other areas, in some area you have water, but you don't have operation cost, and you don't. Then the first investment is needed more and more, and the governance issue with the water establishment, and then the increase of the collection, and then this is needed to lot of.
Very good. The Wafa, did we secure enough funds? Do you think now? I mean, do we have enough investment or funds to do these investment plans? And I'm just curious, or how short are we? And do we really know? I mean, I'm just curious in terms of data, in terms of the knowledge, from the government perspective. So because it seems to me we need to figure out or project how much water we need, right, into the future, prepare for that, ensure that there's supply, and then there are all the other issues that you're talking about between the governance issues, the maintenance, the operation, the leakages, the collection, right, all of this, right? So let's just tackle the first one, the investments. You know what I mean? Do we have? I mean, we know we have $3 billion, as I mentioned in SAD. I think there are probably other funds that are not accounted for within that. Is that sufficient, or do you think Lebanon needs more in terms of investments to secure water supply?
Well, in terms of, I can tell you about the ongoing, to give an idea of what is ongoing project, the volume of ongoing project in this sector, from CDR, because you know that in the ministry they have also investment with the water establishment, but I don't have now the figures. But let's say for CDR, we have actually in the sector, in the water supply, ongoing contract for like $687 million. 75% of this investment is financed from foreign loans and grants.
This is not SAD, this is independent.
Not SAD, it's ongoing, and contract ongoing. And in the irrigation sector, like $430 million, which mostly it's the Canal 800 scheme, which is irrigation for the south. It's also mainly finance from the Arab Fund and Kuwait Fund. And then the wastewater sector, we have ongoing contract also for around $542 million, also mostly financed from foreign loans. The total portfolio in this three sector actual ongoing project is 1.6 yeah. This is, but you have the major investment here. It's the Bisri Dam and the Awali project, also transmission water. This is for Beirut and Mount Lebanon area. And then for the south, the Canal 800. Those are three major projects. And for the wastewater sector, a lot of program ongoing to improve when they end up with at the end of those schemes will have better situation in the wastewater sector. But you asked me about the needs of the sector. What has been presented in the SADR program, it's all it was prepared by CDR, but mainly it's the ministry with the water establishment. This is the needs for like 12 years to come. but and it includes all the investment needed as a scheme to complement all the schemes of the country we hope to find out agreements and to finance the project from SEDR.
Okay, thanks. So Wafa, so the 1.6 billion is obviously managed by CDR. We don't know, or I don't know, but in terms of this doesn't include the Ministry of Energy and Water current ongoing projects, right? No, it doesn't. Okay, and then we'll add to the sad ones. But Amal, what's your sense from the World Bank? You know what I mean? So in terms of how much investments Lebanon needs to ensure the right supply or amount of water that you think, or you have done, or you've estimated?
So our focus has been on Greater Beirut, Mount Lebanon, and we focused with the Bisri Dam and the Awali project and the Wardania water treatment plan on what we can do is the 1.6 million people in Greater Beirut, Mount Lebanon. So that has been our focus in terms of access. But I would really take a step back to say what happens is, first of all, I'm not going to repeat what Wafa says, but you had crisis. You have a lot of shocks in Lebanon, which means that there were periods of unpredictability, and that affects globally when you see what we call the fragile countries being fragile because of neighbor situation or crisis, is that it does disturb the investment, it does disturb the whole sector. So that's part of it. The second part is also, I would say, also normal. You start by, when you work on the water sector, by the easier technically and the cheaper solution. So you will start by using the river as is. You will start by using the groundwater. And then the stage where you are now is when you are going to the more complex technically solution and also harder in terms of implementation. When you build a dam, the time you do all the studies, the environmental and social impact assessment, when you do the detailed design, when you do all of the study, we're talking 3-4 years in general. And then the building of the dam itself usually is 5-6 years, depending on the dam. I'm just putting averages. So we're talking already 10 years between the time where you would initially assess, we need that dam, this is the place that potentially you can have the dam until it starts to operate. So I think where we are now in Lebanon is at the stage where you have solutions that take longer to implement. So it's not that things are not done properly, it's that simply solutions are more complex, so it takes more time. In terms of is there enough funding, I think the SEDG responded because there are a lot of projects in water and sanitation, and I think that's very important. It's not only the supply of water, but again, is how you protect the sources of water, how you ensure that people get safe water. So it's the whole sanitation and water. So there are more needs, obviously. What is here already would at least alleviate and at least help the situation.
Amal, you've been, yeah, please first.
Just because we're talking in terms of time, what also takes a lot of time, as Amal said, in the context of the environmental and social impact assessments, etc., and the site selection itself takes a lot of time. It also applies to our project, and also expropriation issues. If you're talking about treatment plants, for example, and also if you're talking about main collectors, you usually have to deal with expropriation, which costs a lot, several years. We still have loans not implemented since years because of expropriation issues. And to your question, what's still lacking, of course I cannot answer this question, but it's also a question of the capacities of the foreign donors, these capacities, as Amal said, it depends also on the emergencies, the felt emergencies of the partner countries, and they can differ. While you were investing first in the large infrastructure like building wastewater treatment plants for the coastal cities, etc. With the Syrian refugee crisis, you were also in a very high need of rehabilitation of the municipal water and wastewater networks. So the orientation shifts, and this is communicated to the donors. We are not a donor, we're a financing institution, but this is communicated to BMZ, for example, in our case, in the context of state-to-state negotiations. And you set the priorities. So in terms of capacities of the donors, let's say for Germany at the moment, it's through KfW, around 50 million euros per year. It's just an average, because Lebanon has also other priorities. It's not only about water. You have also, or we have, I'm a Lebanese too, very high needs in the education sector, very high needs in the local economic sector. So it's you're always trying to find a balance together, the donor, the financing institution in our case, and the partner.
Also, this is a very important point, is the cycle of the project, because sometimes now everybody is talking about SADR, and as if the money are there still, and then we can the pledge, but not to give you an idea, from the pledge date, which is last year, to the actual reality, then we can make a contract and start work. And it takes some time, lot of time, and it depends on the political situation and the readiness of everybody to approve project and to go to the parliament to approve at the parliament. Now we have this project on Jaita with our friends, the KfW. It's dated 2012. 2012, and still we didn't start the implementation because of a lot of problems related to the expropriation, to the agreement with the population on the site of that wastewater treatment plant, on the change of the site, and then the ministry, and then involvement. Lot of things happen during the implementation. Then the cycle of the project, normally when you design it and when you prepare the financing agreement, we try to have it like between 5 to 6 years, but in reality, no project will finish before 10 years. Then to get the result, you need to make a lot of effort, and especially in Lebanon, you don't have like a straightforward political situation calm for 10 years. Then it doesn't happen till now.
Wafa, I wanted to go to Rami, but I'll come back to Rami. But on this point, so let me just sort of take it a little bit further, because you've been mentioning that there's a cycle, there is an approval process that starts from the politics, obviously the approval from the council and even sometimes to the parliament, right? Let's just assume we've dealt with this, and then we move on to the institutions, right? And we have CDR, we have the ministry, we have the water establishment, and so forth. And I think this issue of the institutional capabilities and the staffing, that's actually, is it a problem of that? It's not enough resources to actually manage these projects? Because if I'm comparing how much Lebanon has managed projects, public investments, between roughly 500 million to $1 billion maximum, if I include CDR plus the ministries, right? And now when I hear that we got $11 billion from SED, right, the first question I have, do we have the administrative capability to actually manage projects twice the amount of what we're managing today with the resources that we have, right? Or let me ask it in a different way. What needs to happen for Lebanon to be able to sort of capitalize on the so-called available resources to do these investments, right? I mean, let's just turn it around a little bit. Is that, or to what extent is that a problem, or from where you're sitting in terms of CDR?
First, for the SADR, it's partly, as I understood, partly it's through the private sector. Then part of this investment will be done and part via the public sector. And then the reform agenda is also part of SADR. Then all of these will come up with something feasible, I think, with the political situation better than the one now. Yeah.
I'll get you. You can say. I wanted to give Rami the floor a little bit to reflect, but I like.
I call that gender integration.
I love it because, what's that?
Gender integration.
Rami, do you have anything to say? No, I'm joking. No, Rami, before I give Hanan, because I want to sort of, just Rami, just to, sort of to catch up from USAID in terms of these problems. How do you see them? How much are you sort of have looked at these sort of problems and sort of just take it in a nutshell, you know, just so we're up to speed also from the USAID perspective.
Yeah, sure. I want to go back to your question. What's the problem? And I'm going to try to answer it in a different perspective, of course, without devalidating what my colleagues have mentioned, because there's a lot of truth in what they said. What I know for sure, the problem is not Mother Nature like in Jordan. We have the resources. And it's not necessarily all investment. Like the price tag on the national water sector strategy is $5 billion. If we have the $5 billion today, would we solve our problems? First, there's that cycle that you both mentioned, and it's going to take time to channel all those $5 billion. And second, what we believe, there is a lot of, going back to your question, what's the problem? The problem is it's all under the bigger title of governance, the management of resources. That's at least how we see the problem is. And just think of the non-revenue water as an indicator. For every cubic meter that is pumped, only half cubic meter is accounted for. So further mobilization of investments is also going to be subjected to that loss. So what we think is, until all those capital investments have been completed, what's usually referred to as the low-hanging fruits is work on the management of the resources. And that's what LWP and the USAID spirit of assistance is. What do I specifically mean about that is, first, as I said in the beginning, we have to quantify. Without quantities, we really don't know what's being, how the trend of consumption and by whom and where. And we've witnessed real-life examples under LWP in 3 different regions in Lebanon where the moment meters were installed without being the tariff being implemented, just the fact the meters are there, you could immediately see a change in the trend of consumption. And then the water establishments have something to rely on. They have a different perspective of approaching their problems. They know what they're dealing with. And then until the staff is available, which definitely is needed for that amount of capital investment, the water establishments have to have a complete upgrade and improvement in their management tools. 15 years ago, I wish the establishments were still here, they used to do things the old way. And now with the assistance of USAID and other donors, of course, new management tools are being introduced, especially the enterprise resource planning software, the ERP, which takes care of the smallest details of your business to the procurement and all other important dynamics. That's how we see we can solve the problem. We should have a greater emphasis on the management of what's available until all the capital investment has caught up with the needs, especially the non-revenue water.
Very good, thank you. No, it's a very good point. Hanan, sorry, you wanted to say something.
I just wanted to say on a positive note, when you see the whole sector as such, it can get a little bit frustrating, but if you go to the regions, there is some success already, and especially in the last years, I think. And we always measure the impacts of our interventions. It's a very, of course, important, as also for my colleagues here. a very important component of our project. So if you see, we have some interventions that don't last long. I don't need long time to be implemented. Like when you invest in pumping stations and pumps, what we will be doing in Dubai water treatment plant. It's a pity Mr. Jean Gibran is not here anymore. We will just replace defect pumps, and you will have effect for like more than 1 million people in Beirut from that day to the other. So it's not only about interventions that take 7 to 10 years.
Okay, good. Just before I open the floor, just take two sort of issues, and I'd love to comment on. One, we did a study at LCPS, and we showed how cross-country, this is like, using data that's available, countries that have good quality of infrastructure, electricity, water, road, and so forth, is actually, obviously, the higher the income is, the better these qualities, right? And from that, Lebanon sticks out to be actually an anomaly. That means for Lebanon's level of development, Lebanon scores very badly on this quality of infrastructure. You know what I mean? Actually, it's the worst in electricity for that group of countries that are very similar to Lebanon in terms of GDP per capita, water, roads, wastewater. It's pretty bad right now. So one idea is that, okay, because we're not investing enough, and I think that's definitely an issue. And then when you correlate that with indicators, again, worldwide indicators related to efficiency of spending, i.e. corruption, you know what I mean, and so forth, there's a very strong correlation, again, for the 140 countries. The countries that are least corrupt have the highest quality of infrastructure. The countries that are the most corrupt have very quality of infrastructure. And Lebanon is at the bottom, right? Poor quality, high corruption, right? So, and then sort of the question is here, is it about the procurement? Is it about the companies? Is it about the lack of regulation or lack of capability? What is it, right? That, and I mean, because I don't want to sort of talk about corruption in the wider sense, but just to be very specific to the water sector. So, and that's sort of one thing, I mean, before I open it to the floor, and Amal, you mentioned the Bisri Dam several times, right? And I mean, this whole issue, twice. I was like, what? No, so there are issues here, and specifically on the dams as an investment. You know what I mean? Does it really make sense? This is something, as you very well know, probably, right? It's being sort of being sort of an issue, right? You know what I mean? In the larger public, whether I want to sort of get a sense from you, because it's also about the issue of the investments in dams as a sound sort of way to go, and the connecting the water, if you get the dam, the networks, plus the Litani River, right, that's polluted. And then comes the question is, what's the role of the state, and how able is our state? I can't even stop these factories from dumping, right, into the Litani, right? So you start wondering, you know what I mean, we're going into these complex operations, whereas some solid intervention by the state seems to be absent, right? I mean, I'm going to give you the floor just to reflect on that and to tell me your thoughts, because I'm sure this is something that's been at the bank's table, at least for now.
Definitely. And it's not one question, it's many questions that you're asking, so I will respond in order, if you allow me. In terms of infrastructure and compared to the GDP, I really, really believe we should add the dimension of fragility. And just to give you a comparison, if a country with the same GDP of Lebanon had 20 years with no shocks, with no conflict, I'm sure the picture is very different. So I would add that dimension, because usually I don't see it. And you don't have that many middle income that have that instability. It's pretty much Middle East, North Africa region. It's pretty much our region. So I just wanted to also add that dimension, if you allow me. The second aspect in terms, since we're talking about the Bisri Dam, I really want to explain also in the project cycle, and that's why also it takes time. When we receive a request from the government of Lebanon on any large infrastructure, but large infrastructure in particular, Actually, part of the due diligence and the policies is that we look at all the aspects. And among the aspects are the economic and financial. So, for example, on the case of the B3 dam, we had the environmental and social impact assessment. The first thing that we did was an alternative analysis. And the alternative, actually when I say we did, it's the government of Lebanon that did the alternative analysis, and we reviewed to see whether this is within the standard, the global standard. And what the alternative analysis looked at was options that were non-dams options and dam options. And the non-dams options looked at the groundwater, looked at the reuse of wastewater, the reduction of leakages, etc. So it looked at, can we provide sufficient water by 2035 in Greater Beirut, Mount Lebanon, without using a dam? Is any of the solutions by themselves sufficient? That was the question. And then within dams, we're looking at the Jannah Dam, the Damour Dam, and the B3 Dam. So the result of this alternative analysis showed that you need B3 Dam. And I want really to emphasize, because I find that the dialogue is very polarized, unfortunately, on dam, non-dams. The result was that you need actually all the options. You need to use the renewable part of your groundwater, you need to reduce the leakages, you need to do reuse of wastewater, and you need storage. So actually you need all of the solutions. So it's not one solution against another. So just not to take too much of the time, actually among the procedure that we did look at the economic aspect of the B3 dam, on how much it cost compared to other solutions, and the B3 dam came as the next best solution with clear recommendation, which we are working on our project on the demand management, working with the ministry, working with the Beirut Mount Lebanon in terms of strengthening the institution, reduction of leakages, like Rami and Hannah said, the non-revenue water, that's also fundamental. And all of that, in any case, will help you also attract the private sector. And what we call the maximizing finance for development is getting more of the private financing. And the idea is not just getting the money, but it's also getting this change of behavior to performance. How you can say for this amount of money, this will be the performance. So that's the change that is happening and is within the set discussion, etc. So it's a long response, but it was many questions in one.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Amal. I'm going to open the floor now to questions. Please introduce yourself, and just to restrict it to 2 minutes maximum so we can sort of have many people sort of questions. The gentleman here and then the woman.
I need quickly. Sorry?
I wanted the microphone so we can all hear you.
Thank you. I need quickly to address the point about dams versus non-dams. Yes, the country is polarized, but each one has point of view. So we need to be a little bit careful about promoting one or the other. I think the economic side, you're right, is very important. Does the country need to be in debt for the rest of our lives and our children's and children's? That's the question. What I'd like to ask from the panel, please. A lot of people are talking about water integrity, and especially at the Assam Institute Fairs, they are the pioneers of the water integrity. It's another word of corruption. My question is, what is your institute, World Bank versus other, are doing to ensure your money is well spent and it's accountable for? Accountability. Thank you.
Thank you. Please. I'm going to take like a few questions and then have them respond and come back. So please.
Thanks. I'm Renata Rad from UNHCR. Okay. First, it's a small reflection about the day, very quick, but a very important question, I hope. Well, we have heard today Olivier mentioning in the morning that 80% of Lebanon tap water is contaminated. Then Ziad and Ralph spoke about the SDG and the fact that access to safe water is a human right for all. Then we heard about strategies and plans that are being developed or updated, and about very much needed investment in infrastructure. Nevertheless, there is an accurate and vital need for people now to drink safe water. How are these big investment plans looking at this fact now and not in 10 years, up until all these investments will take place and will give results. We heard about the impact monitoring. This is very well noted. Nevertheless, we have people now suffering and not really getting the safe water.
Very good, thank you. I have this gentleman over there in the back, and then here and here.
My name is Salah Saliba. I work for LWP, mainly on private sector participation. I've heard, and I went back immediately to the CIP. In the CIP, there has been, out of the 18 to 20 projects proposed by the Lebanese government, we have 3 major dams, 5 big wastewater facilities. And we knew that there was a prerequisite to have the Code de l'eau passed through the parliament before we go to the said agreement. I'm just underlining this issue to point out that the prerequisite goes to the fact that the donors want to make sure that there will be a mechanism to get returns on investments and to impose a consumption-based tariff. We know up to this stage the issue of tariff has been mentioned a couple of times, but the key to make sure that the investments that are brought in by the donors or by the international community are they're finding ways of providing returns on investment and pulling in a proper tariff. So it's not it's a minor question in a way. What is the strategy towards working extensively on improving the returns on the investments and to entice the private sector to invest? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Please.
I'm going to reiterate probably a question that I made on the first panel. Would have been probably interesting to mix those panels between those investing and those managing the infrastructure here. Because I saw a lot of focus, that is the title of the panel, about investment, capital investment, infrastructure. Just Rami has been mentioning capacity building and other things. We saw, been on the many projects that have been implemented, infrastructure being implemented, that after 5, 6, 10 years, they need a new investment again because they haven't been properly operated and managed. We are talking about the CIP, full investment, a lot of infrastructure. In 10 years, probably you will be in a similar situation. There is a problem of capacity of, not absorption, in terms of implementation of the project, in terms of reception of the project by the establishment and how to, for them, get out revenues from that to operate. And we're not talking about repaying the capital investment, but at least to pay operation maintenance. We all know that there is an issue that no one, in my opinion, wants really to talk about, that is the lack of staff. That has been blocked. And in other countries, the financing institutions usually are the one pushing for reducing the public staff. I think here we are in the opposite situation, where everyone is advocating for more staff for the establishment. How we can link the investment of the bank, of the financing institution, or to assure that the establishment would have enough staff for the program like the one done by USAID or financed by you to be received. We are training, we don't have anyone to train.
Very good, thank you. I had someone here, please.
Hello, I'm Asma Al-Hajal from EDS, and I'm also a master's student at the Ecosystem Management here at the UB. I would like to know what is the role of donors and contractors in preventing investment that cause environmental destruction? And when will we start hearing about the cost of ecological and cultural losses which fall under environmental justice?
Very good, thank you. Nice to start. There's someone in the back, sorry, maybe here. And then I have you. I have two
Hi.
here. Go ahead. No, you.
Sure. Hi, Jawad from GBC. I would just like to ask, because it's been more than a couple of decades of grants, loans, and implementation by certain government agencies of similar programs, and I know that they take a lot of time to implement. But the question is, has there been an independent third-party evaluation of the value for money of these projects, of their success over time, of their efficiency, their effectiveness, their life cycle costs after being implemented? Has this been done, and does that inform future investment planning? Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Thank you for being short, by the way. Okay, so let me just see how many people have questions, right? I have 2 here. Okay, good. Then what I'm going to do is have you ask the questions, and then have the panelists answer. The gentleman wearing blue, please. Yeah.
Yeah, Emmanuel Haddad, journalist. A question for Amal Talbi. So there was, in November 2000, a report after 2 years of studies. It was the first and only report on assessing the dams in general, the World Commission on Dams. It was actually with participation of the World Bank, and the conclusion was that most of the dams were whether inefficient, whether ill-managed, or the cost, ecological cost or social cost was too high in comparison with the alternatives. So I had 2 questions. Could you tell us more about the alternatives, non-dam alternatives for Bisri that you said you proposed? And could you tell us more about who did this alternative study, and is it available? Could we have a transparent look at it after complaints of local experts on that issue?
Very good, thank you.
Okay, that was my question, but it's fine. I have also another question, maybe for the World Bank. So we know that leakages are one of the most important problems. So even if we do have dams, we need to work a lot on leakages. And I understand that the World Bank is working on the performance-based contracting, but it's a form of service, correct? It's a form of paying for services based on performance. So is there maybe something else that the World Bank is investing in, given that there's a lot of work to be done on leakages in order for Bisri to be effective? Thank you.
Very good, thank you. All right, Amal, maybe we'll start with you. You know what I mean? And so I think we have sort of 8 questions / interventions. And I think in a nutshell, I mean, just a couple of them are the management, you know what I mean, evaluation, a couple of times mentioned, you know what I mean, the safety of the water, the CIP and the code law, and what's the strategy to sort of improve that. The issue of staffing and the maintenance and operations, that was sort of another issue. Ecological costs, when are we going to take that into account? As I already mentioned, the evaluation as it comes back again, and the issue of the alternatives, non-dam, alternative, these studies, you know what I mean, and leakages. Maybe we'll start with you, and then move to Rami, and then Wafa, and then Hanan.
Very good. Thank you very much. So I will start with the question on the procurement and the follow-on financial management. So whenever there's a loan from the World Bank, there's what we call an implementing agency, and the World Bank procurement is the one applied in this case. So we have the procurement process that follows the bank standard. We also have the financial management standard. Every year we have an auditing of all the accounts that have been in our project. So there are specific procedure. And just to say that it's really followed very closely, we have procurement specialists here at the World Bank office in Beirut. We have the financial management team here in Beirut. And I would say that in general, the water project in Lebanon, we have 2 water experts based in Beirut, specifically to work on the water aspect, and other experts. So I just wanted to say that's very, very close follow-up, and it's really specific policies and standards. It's not like budget transfer. So there's really a procedure, and we can provide further information as needed. Going again to the alternative analysis. So the alternative analysis was done by a consultancy services that provided the study, which was reviewed at the bank by different team actually, and it's available publicly. It's a chapter in the environmental and social impact assessment. So what it looked is at the volume of water that can be provided at the alternative. For example, if you look at Greater Beirut, Mount Lebanon needs of water by 2035, it's 500 million cubic meters, which means that you cannot, for example, use the groundwater in Beirut as the source. The 2014 UNDP study showed that already Beirut groundwater has an overuse today of 150 million cubic meters. So it looked at the option of groundwater. Can it be the only source? And the response is it cannot. It's one of the sources, as I said. It's one of the multiple sources. The reduction of leakages, when you calculate this non-revenue water, which is about 50%, which part is technical losses, part is commercial losses, also it doesn't provide you the shortage of water that you have by 2035, which is about 350 million cubic meter when you look at the other sources. So I would really, we can discuss separately. We have the inspection panel report, which has been, the inspection panel has been the group that was contacted by requester and NGOs asking these questions about the alternative analysis, the environmental aspect, social aspect, economic aspect. So that is an independent group that reports to the World Bank board. So it's independent from our units. Their report is publicly available since December 7, 2018. So they explain what they have been looking at. They've come to Lebanon, they've met the requesters, they looked at all the documents, etc. So I'll be very happy also if you want more discussion on the whole process in terms of the World Commission. I want to say that the World Commission report was actually with many stakeholders, and it was with NGOs, it was with many partners. And the position of the bank at the time, I was not at the bank yet in 2000, I came 2 years after that, but the position of the bank was that we continue to work on what we call good dams. So dams that follows the process, the proper process, being economic, being financial, that what you provide as the cost of water is financially acceptable, etc., environmental, social, archaeology, etc. So that's one of the conclusion that came. So it's very important, and when I say, I'm sorry, when I say polarized discussion, I didn't mean it in Lebanon. I meant in general, globally, we really see this dam, non-dam discussion, while in fact what we see a lot is many solutions are needed at the same time. So I just wanted, I'm sorry, I apologize if I gave the impression that it was specific to Lebanon, so I wanted... On the performance-based contract, and that linked to the discussion also on the human resources, the reason we went to discuss with the Beirut Mount Lebanon Water Establishment on performance contract done by the private sector is specifically because you don't have enough human resources. So some of the zones of Beirut, you have the reduction of leakages done by the staff of the Beirut Mount Lebanon, and then we said, if you want to scale it up quickly, given the needs, it's a large city, you have to have contract management with the private sector. It's simply one of the solutions that you find as an alternative to recruiting all the staff, etc. But again, that's globally what you see, that you get the private sector for some of the function, and usually part of it is done in the water establishment, part of it by the private sector is just a way also to have more efficiency. I hope I didn't forget any question. If so, I can come back.
Sure. Rami?
Okay, I'm going to start with combining two questions. How are we accountable for the investments and the evaluation of investments? And by the way, most of the questions I felt it could be more the end user or the recipient of the government level more appropriate to answer them, but I will still answer them from the donor's perspective. How are we accountable for the investments? That starts day one, the moment we decide to design and procure an investment. First, the design is done by experts, and then when it goes to the procurement, it is public. It's on a public website, announced. We don't have sole sourcing or what's called بالتراضي, so it starts from there. And then it goes through a very precise and procurement-sensitive process. And then when it's implemented against specific deliverables and the contract and specific performance standards. And we do not transfer money. It's all done in-house with USAID, what we call USAID implementing partners or contractors in the more contractual sense. So there is no room for having the money abused, unless, God forbids, our contractors turns out to be an abuser, which we rarely or scarcely had that. And if it happens, there is all these contractors are held accountable to the US government courts and laws, and it takes a legal path. So again, it's all against specific deliverables and performance standards. And then we have our own internal independent evaluations, which is we get a completely third party company, completely independent from the implementing partner, and we hold a contract with them to evaluate the other contractors' work. If there is a need for a financial audit or a performance audit, we also have the right channels to do that. And the beauty that all of this, including the contractors' quarterly progress reports, are posted online publicly on the website USAID DEC. You can even Google it on your mobile phone now at this moment. So there isn't anything that's kept to ourselves. How to have safe drinking water. Again, it also starts with the inception of an activity that we do. Anything that has to do with transfer of water or supply of water project, even if we're not mobilizing a resource or installing a new network, the first thing we request our contractor, and they're here, you can check with them, is to have an independent test of the quality of the water. If the resource is not adequate, then we either find a way with the establishment to make it adequate, or we inform of it, and then they take the necessary decision to do that. And we haven't faced that challenge, by the way. And then that's, like, in general, our strategic approach to providing safe water. There is also the specific approach when we do interventions specifically to make water safe for drinking. Like in Bekaa, we have installed more than 19 chlorinators for sources, and they're monitored and they're tested for the adequate quality of water. And there is the higher strategic level of water quality assurance plans that we're doing with AUB, San Faris Institute, with Dr. Nadim and his team. And that is a strategic tool for the water establishments on how they can monitor quality and how they can secure and control water quality with recommendations of investments. The strategy on return on investment, Salah, you're in-house, and I think that's more of to my colleagues, but at least our approach when we are providing a capital assistance to the water establishments, we want to make sure that for every dollar of capital investment they're going to receive, they will be able to have a return or a source of fee collection, or a source of fee to maintain it, at least to return the OPEX. Otherwise, we are not providing any capital assistance that becomes a financial burden on the recipient. I think that also answers the other question, how to sustain investment and recover OPEX, Michaele. But the lack of staff, yeah, I hear you, and you've raised that question in the previous panel. What USAID is doing is, again, we're not providing anything that becomes a burden or that we know will not be able to be sustained because of lack of staff. And that's why all of our infrastructure investments are of a humble scale compared to what the CDR channels every year or what the World Bank provides. They're limited, small to medium scale investments that do not exceed the $5 or $6 million per investment. And they're already something they're doing, like we're not introducing sophisticated technologies. Even when we introduced wastewater treatment plants at the time to the communities, not to the water establishments that weren't ready to take over yet, it was a very simple, basic technology. The last thing about environmental destruction and ecological cost. Well, obviously, as I told you, our investments are of a very humble scale. We're not doing any destruction yet. we have our own internal procedures of environmental assessment and an initial environmental examination. It is done here and at USAID Washington. It's not only done in-house. And we go through the Ministry of Environment requirements for environmental assessment. And whenever there is a project that triggers the threshold in the environment and the Ministry of Environment to do a scoping session, we have a scoping session with the community, and we either reach a solution with the community that if they have a concern, we either reach a mutual agreement on the mitigation of the concern, or we drop the whole thing. But that's in theory, but we have never had a project of that scale, or our. Yeah, they can answer for themselves, but at least from USAID perspective, that's what I have to tell you.
Thank you, Rami. Wafa?
I think I will talk about 2 points because the other point was already. For the staffing and operation and maintenance, I think for from the perspective of the financing agreement, we already first is assess the capability for the operation of any investment done. Then there are conditionality on the water establishment for the operation and maintenance. They are involved from the day one of before the construction of any investment done. And then for the staffing issue, for many projects, really the way to do operation and maintenance should change with the water establishment for water or for wastewater, because the involvement of service provider from the private sector for the operation and maintenance should become like business, and in the country should be developed the skills and the how to do the O&M and so. Then what is needed from the utility and from the water establishment is to have the skills to do a contract for operation and maintenance, to prepare, to control what has been done in the utility, how we are operating this utility, how we are maintaining, and then those skills need to be improved. And then sure, if there are shortage in the staffing should be, but unless they will improve the collection, and it's very difficult. And especially we're talking about sector, we call this kind of service is social, have a social dimension. You could not cut the water on somebody who's not this is the other point raised concerning the cost for the investment on because it's loans and so on. I can assure you that for this sector, the financial the agreements or the loans and the grants we receive are much more like soft loans. And then the conditions are very well established, and then they are very good. And then it's compared to what if you want to invest from local money, it's much less costly. Because also, as you know, for the local investment, it's very, very costly, the local investment. You are taking from Euro bonds and so on, that's very costly. But the loans for the water sector are really in good terms.
Thank you, Wafa. Hanan?
Everybody's tired. I don't want to repeat because it's really very similar, especially what Rami was saying, for example, on the issue of corruption, how we make sure our funds are used properly. So we really go into the detail of examining, verifying all these things. We have the consultants. We do ourselves use fund checking. We go to the partners, sit over accounting, invoices, etc. It's a mixture of different mechanisms. And concerning the quality, Renata's gone, so no need to answer. What else? Operation and maintenance is indeed a huge challenge for us. We are in discussion amongst the donors ourselves, how to overcome this challenge to make our investments really as sustainable as possible. We as KfW have one mechanism to enhance the capacities of our partners during implementation of projects. We offer so-called accompanying measures when there is a lack of capacities, when partners ask us to support them in their know-how, etc. And we usually also finance the operation and maintenance for 2 to 3 years, but then there comes the question, what do you do then?
Thank you so much.
If I can respond, somebody was re-mentioning environmental aspects, so I just wanted to say...
Just in 20 seconds.
Okay.
Can you do that?
Yeah,
in 20 seconds?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yes, so I just wanted to say, and then we can have a separate discussion, the environmental and social impact assessment is available on the website. It was also reviewed by the Ministry of Environment, approved by the Ministry of Environment, and they're what we call the Biodiversity Action Plan that is already, we have started the implementation, but I'd be more than happy to continue the discussion.
All right.
20 seconds.
Very good. Thank you so much. I think we have to stop right here. I want to thank the panelists, Amal, Rami, Wafa, and Hanan. And I think we move to the last session, which is, I think, the conclusion. Or it is, there's no, you're closed. Very good. Thank you.
Before everybody leaves, I just want to thank the panelists for this last session and the panelists throughout the day. It has been a little bit tiring, but I really appreciate you all hanging around and thank you. And sticking with this. I think it was quite informative, Sally. And what we would like just to share with you briefly our couple of thoughts. I will start with saying it is a very timely event. We have touched upon key elements that are very kernel to developments going on in Lebanon and to Lebanon's economy. And we hope that this sheds light on the water sector in general and the issues that are relevant to this. Sally.
Thank you. And just to build on what Nadim is saying is that I think that today was definitely an opportunity. A lot of really important issues were brought to the table, were discussed, were highlighted, and several very large challenges that this sector is facing that yet still need to be discussed and debated. But I do see that this is a very key step, in a very timely step at this time when there is this momentum and some form of political will and support from the donors as well and various stakeholders to really invest in this sector. And so I hope, we hope, yes, that this is the start of a dialogue, and we will be, I think, taking up the ministry on her open door policy. And on reviewing the impact of what's been done to date and the strategy reviews and continuing that dialogue, and to do it, I think, as Michele suggested, in a very regular and real-time manner. So while we hope there will be a Lebanon, and we will plan for a Lebanon Water Forum next year, but in the meantime, I think there are several steps that we can all take until between now and next year that today has opened up for us. So thank you once again to all of the panelists and moderators for your time, and for the audience for being with us all day today, which is really quite amazing. And of course for the ministry and the water establishments who spent a significant amount of time with us today but are not here. As well, to our donor, the European Union, and to other donors who were here, and fellow colleagues from the sector as well, and of course to IFI for your really continued support and hosting us and partnership. Thank you. Thanks everyone.